probably won't speak as loud tonight. I'm just getting over laryngitis, and I'm most of the way there. But project my voice too much, I'll go into a coughing fit. That would be unseemly. So welcome. Cody, can you lead us in opening prayer, please? Okay, for those of you who have your lessons book, we're on page 172. Ears to hear. So, start off with looking at the definitions of hear. First definition they had is more of a secular definition. So, perceive with the ear is what they have for the first one. The second one I think is more applicable to us. To be told or informed is the second definition they had for hear. And of course our verse for this week is Matthew 13:9. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Why do you think they separated ears and hear? Is it not the same thing? One's a capability, one's an activity. Yes. Can you hear things and ignore it? We do. No, literally we do. There are some forms of autism where they can't function because they can't pay attention to one thing and ignore the others. And so they just get sensory overload and shut down. Cody? Right? like we said, you have to be able to ignore some of your stimuli, whether it's what you're seeing or what you're hearing, in order to focus on a task at hand. But you shouldn't do it to the point where you're missing vital information, like the sound of a fire truck that's about to hit you. Obviously an extreme example, right? So in Isaiah 40, verse 28, I'll give you an opportunity to all turn there. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. So I like the first two there. Do you not know? Have you not heard? They're using those synonymously, basically saying that they're roughly equal. So they're using knowledge and heard as equal terms, right? So what do you think of that? Absolutely. How many have told their children, fire is hot, or that pan is hot? So you've told them. Do they necessarily have knowledge and understanding of consequences until they violate that and get burned? Absolutely. So, right. It's a cold burn, yep. Absolutely. So whenever we're talking about our primary verse here, Matthew 13:9, whoever has ears, let him hear. So it's not just, let the sound go by you, actually stop and contemplate what the sound means. I've also got Matthew chapter 13, verses 11 through 13. That's on page 173. So it's on the next page. He answered them, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to one who has, more will be given, and to he will have a abundance. But for the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. What do you think that means as far as hearing? I had the same thing happen in both Germany and Italy. I'd catch about in German, 1 in every 5 words, in Italian, 1 in about 10 words, just because a lot of the words we use are based off Latin or our Germanic roots. And that's the only reason I was catching them, is because that word hasn't really changed that much in pronunciation or meaning. But is that enough for me to understand what they're saying, other than fire, get out, come here? No, not really. lawyer. Oh, absolutely. Well, some of them, it's not so much an act. No, we have too many examples to the contrary. Not just current, but previous. I mean, take a look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates prior to the Civil War. You had a lot of senators there who were pretending that they didn't understand the Constitution, where it said all men are created free, because they had financial interests to the opposite. No, I'm testifying to their evil. Depends on the state, but yes. Some states, yes. Absolutely. So, hearing, it requires two things. The teacher tailoring the argument or lesson to the student, and the student attempting to understand, right? Today in class, I had to wake up several different students several different times. The students weren't doing their part, right? The instructors, primarily Mr. Smith, who was one of the other instructors, he was giving multiple examples based on looks on their face and whether or not he was seeing the headlights come on or not. You know, whenever you get the RCA dog look, whenever you say something or the eyes look like they're rolling back in the head almost, you know you better stop and try to explain what you just said another way, because it's not connecting. You can see that it's not connecting. If their head's leaned over and slobber down their chin, yeah, they're not doing their part, right? So hearing, the goal is audience understanding and application, right? But it requires two components. By doing it in parables, it both simplifies and complicates any message that you give. I finally broke the code with the group of students I had yesterday. Most of them had seen the Lord of the Rings movies, so I could use that as examples for different military principles. But I've also tried to use Saving Private Ryan. Oh, that was another failure, because only like 2 of them had ever seen it, and 2 more heard of it. So using that as an example for your students, there's no common ground there. They can't get there, even with a leap of faith. So you got to find some sort of bridge to cross the river of misunderstanding to get them across it. And so now that I know like 8 of them have watched all 3 of the movies and all 10 of them have watched at least one of the movies, I can use those as examples to get across that river of misunderstanding or ignorance. So when we take this hearing, as there's 2 parts to it, what do you think about our core verse? Again, he who has ears, let him hear. That would be like me saying to my students what? Hey, you might see this again a week from tomorrow on the exam. You might want to pay attention. I sort of view that as the Christ giving a foot stomp there. If you have ears, let him hear. He's basically saying, I'm saying something important. You probably should pay attention to this one. So can good crops grow in even bad soil? Okay, I'll yield on that one, because I'm thinking of, in particular, Jonah. His message was a bit harsh, right? God told me to come tell you guys that he's going to wipe out this city in X number of days, right? And I'm going to sit up on the hill and laugh as you all die because you're enemies of Israel. They took him seriously, right? They go, okay. They knew the reputation of the prophets coming from Israel, and what they said always came true, or they would have already been stoned to death. The test of the prophets, right? You got to give a short-term prophecy, then a long-term prophecy. And if the short-term prophecy doesn't come true, then they stone you. You're killed right there. And your long-term prophecy is ignored. So whenever they have an Israeli prophet that they know that's the standard, they took it seriously. And the fact that he was looking forward to their destruction, picked out a hill to watch it from, is not what you normally get from a prophet or a preacher, right? You're all going to die. This is going to be great. I'm going to watch it from up on that hill. Not exactly a salvation message, but it hit the spot. They did repent. The king made a law. You will wear sackcloth and ashes. You won't eat. Your animals won't eat. If anybody does, I'll kill you on the spot. Just so we can ensure that this prophecy goes our way instead of against us. Obviously, paraphrased by Harold's unauthorized version. But it got the point across, did it not? Not exactly a contrite heart on the part of that particular prophet. Mm-hmm. Yes. They don't know their left from their right. Yep. And either they're ignorant or they're small. Yeah. No. And thank goodness. So with the teacher needing to tailor the lesson so as it can be received and understood by the audience or the student needing to put forth effort to try and understand, which one applies to us as Christians in our daily walk? Both. Yes, absolutely. Why? Well, sometimes it takes a while for the seed to grow. You got it planted, continue watering it. Harvest is up to God, right? But you do have to put in the good faith effort to continue nudging him in that direction, yes? So how do we apply this? Or how else would we apply this? Because we're both the student and the instructor, right? I mean, does anybody have the entire Bible memorized and understands all of the obvious and hidden meanings of every verse? All right, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's going to be some Pharisees and Sadducees among us who will think that that is true in their case. But a realistic, are any of us really there? I don't think any of us could rightfully claim that we are there. So how do we apply this? Excuse me. And for those who, with the parables, that they don't understand immediately, if somebody tells you a story that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, what do you spend the next several nights doing instead of sleeping? Yeah, in my case, I'm up all night. Even if I'm laying in bed, I'm up all night with that running through my head trying to unravel that thing. So parables, is that not how we transfer stories of right and wrong to our children with fairy tales? Are those not parables? Really simplified parables. realize he's about to get caught, so he starts. So we can save them. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. Give you guys a second to turn there. Second Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. Excuse me. For a time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn aside to myths. But you, keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. So stop and think about that verse for a minute and what is going on in our country and even our world. In Canada, you have a female atheist that is a preacher for an Anglican congregation up there, who was put out on the internet. She wants everybody who took the purity oath not to have relations before marriage and had a purity ring given to them by their parents for that, or their congregation, to send it in, and she was going to make a obscene statue with it and give it to the head of Planned Parenthood. And yet she still has a congregation of over 500. They hired her knowing she was an atheist and knowing that she ridiculed most of what's in the Bible in every single one of her sermons. Would that not be a textbook example of what we just read in 2 Timothy? What do you think? Do you have any other examples? Absolutely. And does terrain change due to weather? I mean, every time we go out to the land nav course on Post, unfortunately, the Post special map that we have is using data from 1954. So if you're trying to use that map to do dead reckoning, just use terrain features, you're going to be off anywhere from a couple hundred meters to an entire kilometer, or just about half a mile. You're off where you think you are. Why? There's been 1 or 2 rainstorms since 1954. People who go to see the battlefield of the Pass of Thermopylae, also known as the Hot Gates. The cliff that the Spartans shoved the Persians off of no longer exists. It's all been eroded. The cliff doesn't exist anymore. At the time of the battle, there was a 200-foot cliff with big boulders below it. And so everything got shoved off, got broken, and drowned, assuming the rocks didn't kill them outright, or the Spartans didn't finish them off with their spears or swords. So saying, oh, this doesn't meet the description, so obviously it didn't happen. No, it's a known fact. Spartans recorded it, and the Persians recorded it. And the Persian army wasn't made up of just Persians, it was also made up of Egyptians and others throughout the Persian Empire. All of them recorded it, and they're all saying roughly the same thing. You know, the Greeks are saying a few nasty things about Xerxes, and Persians are saying really nasty things about the Greeks. But they both agree where the battle took place and what the result of the battle was. And that is secular, where you've got a bunch of different people from different nations documenting the thing. Yet people could still go say, well, obviously it didn't happen because the cliff isn't here, the pass isn't here. There's no way 300 people could hold this pass. It's a mile wide. Well, at the time it wasn't a mile wide. It was only about 30 meters or about 100, 150 feet. They could have definitely held it. So as we take a look at that, again, 2 Timothy chapter 4, 3 through 5, the itching ears, right? They know what they want justified, so they bring in somebody to say that. Say again, please. Soothing words. If you're evaluated at your work, do you want to hear good things in your evaluation? Is it necessarily what you need to improve yourself? It's a good start. It's a good start, but it's not going to get you across the finish line. We have another example of somebody who was preaching and didn't have that many converts. Let's talk about Noah. Probably the best boat builder in history. But his preaching, what was the results of his preaching? How many people did he save other than himself? So 7 other people, right? His wife, his 3 kids, their wives. That was the only people he convinced to do the right thing. I'm convinced that on the ark was sufficient space and provisions for many more people, had they turned their hearts. I'm not going to be able to point that out. God gave him the plans. From the point that God made the decision that, okay, we need a restart, put another quarter in this game. To the point that the rains began for the flood was 120 years, is what we're told. At what point in there Noah was informed of this, We aren't told. But during that time, he had to gather the supplies, build the ark, stock the ark with enough food for 1 to 2 years for everybody and everything that would be aboard, yes? Because the rains, go ahead. We don't. Or vice versa. Absolutely. And maybe to the itching ears of the people outside, right? Was he necessarily preaching what they wanted to hear? Stop doing evil. Stop thinking about evil. Stop killing each other. Stop stealing from each other. Is that necessarily what people want to hear? Kind of people a supervisor, well, most supervisors want. I've had a few supervisors who prefer all of his subordinates to be at each other's throats. I had the pleasure to work for that individual specifically 3 times. It was an adventure that got worse each time. Cody, you had something. Absolutely. Yeah, he probably didn't have a whole lot of extra volunteers helping him. Just him and his family, yeah. And we'll segue into that in a moment. So if you want to take a look at the story of Noah, obviously that'd be in Genesis chapter 6 and chapter 7. Now I'd like to go to 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. So that's a pretty high endorsement, yes? From Peter? What do you think about that? Any thoughts? Thank you. I really like that one. Reminds me of my favorite movie. Favorite movie. It was a Man for All Seasons, referring to the basically Attorney General, I guess would be the best equivalent, to King Henry VIII, the one that kept divorcing and killing his wives. Whenever the Catholic Church wouldn't allow him to divorce them, he set them up on some trumped up charge and then had them executed. So now I can remarry because they're dead, right? Till death do us part. Check. Got it. Whenever they were trying, his so-called friends were trying to get him to agree that King Henry VIII should be allowed to divorce, and the fact that he wasn't agreeing to that was the reason he was in the Tower of London. They said, come on, everybody else is doing it. And he looked at his so-called friends and said, okay, so when you go to heaven for doing your conscience, and I go to hell for not doing mine, will you join me for company's sake? A powerful statement. His friend threw his hands up and left the room at that point. He says, there's no reasoning with him. So thank you for that. For those of you who have not seen that movie, highly recommended. Man for All Seasons. If hearing is an active activity, I know, double adjective, how should we do it? If hearing is an active activity, how should we do it? I'll bring a whiteboard next time. But I'm not guaranteeing my spellings, so they may not come across any clearer. Please. How many have bought those awful Christmas presents for your children that have the really nasty, evil words that says, some assembly required? You read the instructions, more like browse over them, think you understand, and then when you begin to apply it, instead of it looking like a bicycle, it looks somewhat more like a Ferris wheel or a rickshaw. Or that. I'll raise my hand. I know I've been there, right? So, like you said, we need to actively engage it. And you are a lucky person indeed if you have success the first time. Sort of like the original Swiss Family Robinson book. Yeah, everything they tried there is success the first time. Yeah, not likely in the real world. So we answered, how should we do it? Now, what should it lead to? Like we were teaching today to our students, task, purpose, method, desired end state. So we're talking about task and purpose so far, but what about the method and desired end state? What is the desired end state? For a roadmap to be any good, you need to know where you're at and where you're trying to get to, right? You got to have that desired end state. Well, I want to end at Niagara Falls. Well, that's a long, long ride. About 4 days if you follow the speed limits and can avoid most of the construction, destruction of the interstate system. So where do you think, if you have ears, let him hear, should lead to? So we've got where we're at now, corner of lost and dazed and confused, right? Our desired end state is eternal life. So now we just got to break out the roadmap, which the good Lord has provided us, to figure out how we're going to navigate the roads and get there. need to write that one down. I like that one. Excuse me. I've seen a few bumper stickers this week. The coexist, basically any path will get you there. Yeah, if you don't care where you're going. Yep. So that comes to discernment, right? So I talked about the land nav course we have on post. And the land nav map we have, the data is from 1954. And I talked about how that map is now no longer accurate. So do you need to have some discernment on which map you use to get there? Absolutely. You need to find out figure out which map is the most accurate. If I'm going to try and do the land nav course on Fort Huachuca, should I be using the Vine Grove map of Kentucky? It probably won't work so well for me, yes? I'm hoping if I head in one of the wrong directions, at least I'll run into the Border Patrol that'll turn me around and send me in the right direction, right? So in discernment, we're told to test the Spirit. If you can turn to 1 John chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. I always felt 1 John should actually have been 2 John, because we already have a John in the front, right? So 1 John chapter 4, I'm losing my notes. Come back. So 1 John chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now is already in the world. So, any religion that does not acknowledge that Jesus is the Son of God and came in the flesh and died and was raised from the dead is a false spirit. And it's about as useful as that Vine Grove map of Kentucky went on a Arizona land navigation course. So it's still at play today. Yep. I believe that. Okay. I can go with that, but this is definitely one of the first tests that you should put them to. Islam claims that just a prophet. No miraculous birth, no self-raising from the dead. I have talked with Jews that are members of Jews for Judaism that won't even say Jesus Christ's name. They'll call him Mr. JC instead. Literally. And that the apostles stole his body. He was not raised from the dead. That he wasn't even crucified. So how did they fare on this test that we're given here? Yeah. So what if a talking animal? Believe it or not, we have biblical examples of talking animals, do we not? Balaam's donkey, exactly. Was Balaam's donkey allowed to speak the truth? Absolutely. What's the other example of a talking animal we have? How about the snake in the tree? Okay, I'll go with serpent, but I really don't see the difference between the two. I'm sure you can educate me afterwards. What really surprised me about the devil in the form of a snake in the tree in the Garden of Eden is neither Adam nor Eve were surprised that the snake was talking. You can go into all sorts of, it's not documented in the Bible, scratch your head, that's on my bucket list for whenever I get to heaven. I've got about 1,000 years worth of questions that I'm just going to be like a little 2-year-old annoying God with. Did the animals in the Garden of Eden talk? I mean, other than the snake. Serpent. I mean, does it matter towards salvation? No, but it's definitely on my bucket list of things to ask after I'm dead. It's a long list. Absolutely. So even if an animal comes up and starts talking to you, should you give him the test we just read here in 1 John? Well, most of us expect an angel to speak. Some people argue cats and dogs can sometimes, but yeah, most of the other critters, not so much, right? If a cow walked up and started talking to you, might you be checking the expiration date on some of your meds? Oh, okay. I was trying to figure out where you were going with that. It's the RCA dog look I had. So the test of the prophets. Deuteronomy 18, verse 20, which we talked about earlier. I sort of jumped ahead on that one. Where we talked about they got to give 2 prophecies, a short term and a long term. If the short one fails, they're not going to be around to see the long term one, right? So does anybody else have any other input about how do we apply this? Mm-hmm. True, but can the scriptures be abused with the intent to lead you astray? I'm thinking specifically the temptations of Jesus after 40 days of fasting, when the devil came to him and started using scriptures not quite fully appropriately. Did the serpent also misquote and misrepresent what God told Adam and Eve about the tree of life? I'm sorry, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Absolutely. So I believe we're out of time. So, actually my voice is getting stronger, so I'll lead closing prayer. It actually did better tonight than I thought it was going to do. Prayer request. So appeal for prayer for Bill and Doris. I've also got a uncle who suffered somewhere between 95 and 98% blockage of all of the blood vessels in his neck, leading to a stroke. He is out of ICU and is in a retirement home is not the right word, a nursing home for physical therapy. So he can learn to move his the right side or left side. He's basically completely paralyzed on one side and can't really speak. He can't track people talking to him, so his eyes and ears are still working. But last I talked to my mom, he still wasn't speaking yet. So definitely prayers for him as well. Any other prayer request? Okay, let us bow. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for this day and the blessings you have given unto us. We ask that you watch over each of us, that we may be holy and righteous in your sight, and that we may be an example that will lead others to a closer relationship with you. We ask you to be with us and be with those who are not able to be here tonight. Bill and Darlene as they go through their medical issues, with Jack Thread with his medical issues, and I know there are several others here that are sick that can really use your healing. We thank you for your love, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.